ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Let's Play Warframe Grandpa Edition. I'm your host with the most, as always, Francois878, and today we are going to be taking a look at the new generation, the new era of Infested weaponry in Warframe, and why I think that this is a great start to something really cool, and how this new era of weapons should really affect the entire back catalog of Infested gear. Now, I know what you're thinking, what the hell are you talking about? The Mutalist Cyrnos, the Dual Toxite, and the Legion Staff are the three newest Infested weapons that we have here in Warframe. And they all feature an extra special effect that not really any other weapon in Warframe has really had. Now, the Mutalist Cyrnos, as you can see in the gameplay here, fires a normal arrow, like all the other Cyrnoses, but a second shot also spawns out of your quiver, lands roughly where the arrow lands, and will spawn a toxic AoE cloud that will damage everything in the area. Now, this is great for area denial, it's great for defense missions, and it's also just different. You know, no other bow has that sort of AoE defense capabilities. And while the damage on the cloud is quite low, it's something. Now, the weapon you see me using here is the secondary, the Dual Toxite. They're a pair of infested pistols that, when you hit a headshot with them, you will get a 6-second buff that increases your toxic damage, your fire rate, and also gives you unlimited ammunition. It's amazing. These pistols are not great when they're unbuffed. However, they become so much fun to use. They're basically bullet hoses when you have the buff running. And they're just a lot of fun to just spray and pray at Grenier. Now, the final weapon, the Legion, when you trigger a status effect on that weapon, you get an attack speed bonus, a bonus to toxic damage as well. And the Legion is just a fun staff to use. The stance that you use with the Legion is a lot of fun. It's very fast, it's very fluid, and you will be proccing those status effects almost continuously. Now, the reason that the community at large is not a big fan of the Infested weaponry is because the buffs, these activated buffs, with the exception of the Mutalist Cyrnos, so the Dual Toxite and the Legion, these activated buffs do not refresh if you fulfill the requirement again. So, let's say you're running the Dual Toxite, you hit a headshot, you get the 6-second buff. If you hit another headshot in those 6 seconds, it's not going to refresh the timer like Berserker would work. It's just going, you have to run the full 6 seconds out and then get another headshot in order to reactivate the buff. People don't like that. People feel like because there are other mods and there are other effects that refresh, that the Dual Toxite and the Legion buffs should do the same thing. And the part of me that wants these weapons to be amazing all the time, no matter what, agrees with that, but the realistic part of me knows that if you could run the Dual Toxite buff and get it to refresh like that, people would have that buff running entire missions, especially defense or survival. Maybe not defense, because you have to go through different waves, but the buff would be constantly running. You would have unlimited ammunition. It would be OP to have it running and have that buff refresh like that. It's just too much. And quite frankly, the buff isn't that hard to activate. It's just one headshot. People should be aiming for the heads of enemies anyways. And granted, I realize that there are some factions who their head is a little harder to hit, the Infested, but you should kind of take that into consideration before you start the mission, you know, and I know that's not what people like to hear, that there are specific weapons that are not good against every single enemy in the game, but, I mean, that's sort of how it works sometimes, you know? The gear that DE releases can't always be overpowered, or power creep would be worse than it is now, because weapons would just get better and better and better, and all the older weapons would just be junk. And the further along we went, the worse they would be, and we would all just be in for a bad time. Personally, I think these buffs are a good thing. I think they make gameplay much more interesting, and they force you to play a little smarter and play a little better, at least in the dual Toxites case. The Legion, all you have to do is hit status effects, and I believe this weapon has a base 30% status chance anyways, so the Legion, you'll pretty much have the buff running on the Legion going all the time anyways. So I think that this is an interesting concept. It also kind of plays into the Infested lore as well, because these weapons are supposed to be at least somewhat alive, you know, in a matter of speaking. So to see these weapons, I don't want to be too gross, but climax and have a momentary burst of extra damage or extra speed is really interesting, and I think it really plays into the lore of the game and the lore of the Infested. And I think that going back through the entire back catalog of Infested gear and really flushing this out and giving weapons either an extra effect like the Mutalist Cyranosis Toxic Cloud or an activated buff would be very interesting. And it would make Infested weapons more fun to play. I feel like a lot of Infested weapons are kind of overlooked now for Tenno counterparts or Grineer counterparts, Corpus counterparts, etc., etc. But that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming and listening to me ramble about Infested weapons for about 8 minutes. Thank you very much for coming. Please stay tuned for more Warframe content. And if you'd like, go watch some of my back stuff. It's very good. Till next time, I've been your host for the most, as always, Francois878, signing off.